This is Daniel Houchins. She was killed in September of '96, and she was found off the Gallatin River. Did you ever fish up there? Have you been there before?
Probably.
They say grief fades with time, but for Stephanie Mollett, time only sharpened the ache. Not a single day since I was 12, she once told me, have I gone without thinking of my sister Danni. Her voice didn't tremble when she said it, it was steady. Focused, like someone who's carried fire in her chest for decades, and refuses to let it go cold. The story of Danni Hinson is one of those stories that refuses to be buried, not by mud. Not by silence. Not even by time.
Welcome to Dark Chronicles, where shadows hide the truth.
It begins in Bozeman, Montana. September 1996, 15-year-old Danni, a bright, fearless, nature-loving teenager, had just had a fight with her parents. Nothing unusual, just a typical teen moment. She needed space. So, she got into her Chevy pickup and drove to a place she knew well, Cameron Bridge, a peaceful spot surrounded by Montana wilderness. Familiar. Safe. Or so everyone thought, but that night, Danni didn't come home. Her mother grew concerned and went searching. The sheriff was called. Search parties formed. Voices echoed into the woods, Danni. And then, silence, until 9:30 p.m., when two boys, friends of the Hinson family, ventured into the dark with flashlights. And found what no parent should ever have to face, Danni's body, face down in shallow water and mud. Lifeless, just a few feet from the bridge she loved. The official story, an accident. A fall. No foul play. Nothing suspicious, but even at 12, Stephanie knew that didn't make sense. Danni wasn't the kind of girl who tripped and drowned in 2 inches of water, she later said, and she was right, because the deeper you go into this case, the silence from law enforcement, the missing autopsy details, the unanswered questions, the more it feels like something was being buried. For years, the official narrative stayed the same, that Danni had simply fallen, slipped in the mud, drowned, but whisper networks told a different story. Locals began to talk, rumors spread like wildfire, bruises, cuts, even signs of assault, but still, no arrests. No trial. No justice, until decades later, when Stephanie, no longer a little girl but now a woman shaped by loss, decided to reopen her sister's case, and what she would uncover would shake an entire community. A hidden truth, a familiar name, a suspect no one expected. This isn't just a story about a murder, it's about a family betrayed, a town kept in the dark, and a sister who refused to let Danni's voice be silenced. Because this case was never about just what happened that night, it's about Danni. In the immediate aftermath of Danni's death, her family was devastated, but they were also confused. The sheriff's department moved quickly to declare the manner of death undetermined. They said there were no signs of foul play, no cuts, no bruises, no reason to suspect anything but a tragic accident. But what they didn't say is what changed everything. They didn't mention the bruising found on Danni's neck, or the mud found deep in her lungs and stomach, something that doesn't happen unless a person is forcibly held down. They didn't say anything about the signs of sexual trauma, or the semen found on her underwear. Instead, they said she might have just slipped. She tripped, hit her head, and couldn't get back up. Even at 12 years old, Stephanie felt the lie, not just heard it, felt it, and Deputy Keith Farquhar felt it too. He was one of the first officers on the scene. A rookie back then, and as he walked through the swampy area where Danni's body was discovered, alarm bells went off in his mind. This wasn't an accident, this was a crime scene. But when Farquhar tried to share what he saw, when he reported a doctor's opinion that Danni could have easily rolled over and saved herself if she were conscious, he was mocked. What does a doctor know? The sheriff allegedly said, that moment stuck with Farquhar for years. Because it wasn't just dismissal, it was a deliberate decision to turn away from the truth. Within 3 months, Farquhar had left the force. Disillusioned. Frustrated, he couldn't watch the case get buried, not when he knew something was wrong, but Stephanie. She couldn't leave it alone either. Years passed, and as time moved on, Danni's name faded from headlines, yet Stephanie never stopped asking questions, never stopped wondering, who could have done this? Why wasn't it investigated? She called the sheriff's office repeatedly, wrote emails, tried to get a new detective to look at the file. Most of the time, she was ignored, but in 2021, 25 years after her sister's death, things changed. A new sheriff, a new team, and finally, someone who listened. Detective Matt Boxmeyer took interest in Danni's case. He reviewed the old files and quickly realized, this was no accident. The evidence was clear: subcutaneous bruising, mud in her digestive system, defensive wounds, and that missing piece, semen, collected, preserved, but never properly tested, not with modern methods. Boxmeyer ordered a full reanalysis using the latest DNA technology, and what came back was a partial DNA profile, not enough to name a suspect, but enough to open a new door, because now, they had something tangible, something science could work with, and someone, somewhere, whose DNA had just quietly re-entered the case. The path to justice had finally reopened, but the question still remained: who had killed Danni Hinson, and why had they been protected? For nearly 3 decades, to understand what happened next, you have to understand how far forensic science has come. Back in 1996, DNA testing was in its infancy, but by 2021, a revolution had taken place, thanks to a technology few could have predicted: forensic genetic genealogy. It's the same technique that unmasked the Golden State Killer, and now it was about to bring justice to Danni Hinson. Detective Boxmeyer connected with Cece Moore, a genetic genealogist with a reputation for solving cold cases using family trees and consumer DNA databases. Cece didn't have much to work with: a partial DNA profile from semen on Danni's preserved underwear, not enough for a direct hit, but maybe, just maybe, enough to build a family tree. Using DNA submitted voluntarily to ancestry databases, Cece began the painstaking process: match by match, cousins, distant relatives, common ancestors. She traced the suspect's lineage back generations, until 2 branches converged. And there, in the center of it all, was a marriage, a couple with many children. From one of those children came the man she was looking for. His name was Paul Hutchinson. Stephanie had never heard the name, but others in the community had: a Marine Corps veteran, the father of 2, a respected member of the local hunting and fishing scene, a man who blended in, shook hands, and never once raised suspicion. But in the fall of 1996, when Danni was murdered, Hutchinson was just 27 years old. Studying at Montana State University, living only 13 miles from where Danni's body was found, and it wasn't just geography. He knew the area, he knew the Hinson family. And his reputation as a skilled outdoorsman made it easy for him to move undetected through the dense, muddy woods that became Danni's grave. The question now was, how do you confront a man like that without tipping him off? Enter Tom Elfmont, a seasoned investigator, a Vietnam veteran, a man who had worked the toughest streets of Los Angeles, and now, he had one goal: get Hutchinson to talk. Elfmont and his partner posed as fisheries experts, arranging a casual conversation in Hutchinson's small hometown of Dillon, Montana. The plan? Keep it light, keep it friendly, keep it public. But fate gave them an unexpected advantage. It was one of the hottest days on record. And Hutchinson, looking to cool down, invited them inside his home. Inside, the conversation shifted. They showed him photos of women who died under mysterious circumstances, and among them was Danni. Did you ever fish near Cameron Bridge? Maybe, Hutchinson replied. I used to trap around there. But when pressed about the specific night, he grew vague, defensive, uncomfortable. He didn't confess, he didn't deny, because he didn't need to. Elfmont later said, he knew that we knew. And we knew that he knew. A quiet war had begun, a war of stares, of pauses, of unspoken truth, and it wouldn't last long, because just 12 hours later, Paul Hutchinson was dead. When the phone rang, Stephanie didn't expect her world to shift. Again, it was Tom Elfmont. His voice was steady, but the words cracked the air like thunder. Stephanie. He's dead. He killed himself. Paul Hutchinson, the man who had evaded justice for 27 years, was gone. No arrest, no trial, no confession, Just a note, left behind in a moment of silent cowardice. Stephanie froze. There was a long pause. I don't even know how to feel, she whispered. And how could she? For nearly 3 decades, she had imagined what justice might look like. A courtroom, a cross-examination, the chance to look him in the eye and ask, why? Now, that chance was gone. Some called it closure. Others called it a stolen ending, but for Stephanie, it was something else entirely. He took the easy way out, she would later say, and once again, he controlled the ending of my sister's story. News of Hutchinson's suicide broke quickly. The same community that had whispered about Danny's death in 1996 was now stunned. Again, many had known him, some had hunted with him, others had invited him into their homes. How could this man, so ordinary, so trusted, be the killer? One person who struggled with that realization was Rachel Schroeder, a lifelong outdoors woman and editor at a major hunting publication. She had once considered Hutchinson a friend. They had gone on solo fishing trips together. They had talked about family, nature, life, and now she was asking herself the same question everyone else was: did I sit beside a murderer? The community was shaken. Not just by the crime, but by the years of silence that followed it. Why hadn't the truth come out sooner? Why was the case closed so quickly? Why did it take a sister's relentless determination, and a 2020's forensic breakthrough, to do what the authorities failed to do in 1996? Sheriff Dan Springer, who reopened the case, acknowledged that mistakes had been made, but for Stephanie, that admission came with a bitter taste. She hadn't just lost her sister, she had been gaslit, lied to, dismissed, and now the man responsible was gone before he could ever be held accountable. But if you think this story ends in defeat, you don't know Stephanie Mollett, because even as she stood before cameras, thanking the new sheriff's department, she didn't hold back. She named the failures. She called out the cover-ups. She said out loud what no one else had the courage to say: they lied to us. And she was right. Old reports confirmed that key evidence, bruises, abrasions, signs of trauma, had been omitted from public statements. The original sheriff claimed he withheld it to protect the investigation, but the damage was done. A generation had grown up thinking Danni Hinson slipped and fell. Now, the truth was undeniable. She was murdered, she fought back, and she mattered. With the truth finally out, the quiet town of Belgrade, Montana, found itself facing a storm of reflection. The case wasn't just about a girl who died, it was about a system that failed her family, failed her community, failed every other girl who walked those woods thinking they were safe. Whispers became headlines. Conversations that were once confined to back porches and quiet coffee shops now echoed through town halls and news stations. People began to ask uncomfortable questions. How did this happen? Why didn't we push harder back then? Who else knew, and stayed silent? Because the reality was, someone had to know. You don't commit a crime like that and go on living a completely clean life. There are tells, there are slips, there are late-night confessions, half-said things that don't quite make sense. And now that Hutchinson was dead, those suspicions had no place to land, but the damage had already spread. Online, forums lit up with speculation. Some believed Hutchinson may have been involved in other unsolved cases along the Gallatin River and beyond. Women who drowned under mysterious circumstances, missing persons cases that had quietly gone cold. What if Danny wasn't the only one? The question loomed like thunder. Sheriff Springer admitted it was a possibility. Tom Elfmont, the dogged investigator who cracked the case, believed it too. He had spent his life chasing predators, and he knew that killers like Hutchinson didn't always stop after one victim. But with Hutchinson gone, there would be no confessions, no courtroom, no chance to interrogate the man behind the mask, and so the community was left to reckon with more than just a crime. They were forced to reckon with a legacy of complacency, of assumptions, of authorities who had, for whatever reason, chosen to look the other way. It wasn't just incompetence, it was betrayal, and for Stephanie, that betrayal was personal. They didn't just fail to solve my sister's murder, she once told a reporter. They tried to convince us it never happened at all. In a time when many families bury their grief in silence, Stephanie chose to turn hers into a megaphone. She spoke at schools, she worked with victims' rights groups, she told Danny's story again and again, not for sympathy, but to force accountability, because if Danny's case could be buried for nearly 30 years in a town like Belgrade, then how many other Dannys are out there, unseen, unheard, unsolved? Stephanie refused to let that be her sister's final chapter, and in doing so, she rewrote the ending, not one of vengeance, but of truth, of remembrance, and most importantly, of voice, because in the end, this story isn't about the man who took Danni's life, it's about the sister who refused to let her be forgotten. It took nearly 3 decades to get here, 28 years of silence, frustration, and heartache, years where birthdays passed with one chair always empty, years when justice felt like a fantasy, not a goal, and then, finally, there was a name, there was a face, there was a conclusion, even if imperfect, but justice, as we learn in stories like this, doesn't always come with handcuffs or trials. Sometimes, it comes in the form of truth, painful, raw, and far too late, but real. And with that truth, came the time to say goodbye. Stephanie returned to the place where her sister's life was stolen, the banks of the Gallatin River, but this time, she wasn't there to search, she came to let go. Danni's ashes were divided into 2 parts, half had already been scattered at the highest peak of the Bridger Range, Sacagawea Peak, a place that Danni loved, the other half Stephanie had saved for this moment. She walked to the edge of the water, where the trees whispered overhead and the current moved slow and steady, and with hands that had carried 28 years of grief, she released what remained of her sister into the stream. "I love you, Danni," she said. The words were simple, but behind them was a lifetime of weight, because in the end, Danni wasn't just a victim, she was a daughter, a sister, a classmate, a dreamer, a teenage girl who loved science, laughed at her own jokes, and could outfish most grown men, and while her life ended violently, her legacy would not. Stephanie made sure of that, by telling her story, by confronting those who failed her, by never letting the narrative be rewritten by convenience or politics or public image. Danni mattered, and thanks to Stephanie, the world knows it. But as the river carried away the last of her sister's ashes, Stephanie was left with a quieter question: what now? There would be no courtroom battle, no witness testimonies, no verdict read aloud. Hutchinson had taken that from her, but what he couldn't take was this: the story didn't end the way he planned. He may have thought he buried the truth forever that night in the mud, but truth has a way of surfacing, just like Danni did, and in the years to come, Stephanie hoped her sister's story would do more than close a chapter. She hoped it would ignite something, a movement, a refusal to let other families be silenced, a reminder that every voice matters, even when the system says it doesn't, that justice delayed is still justice, and that no matter how long it takes, someone is always listening. Especially a sister. Sometimes, true crime stories end with sirens, with slammed cell doors, with courtroom applause, but this one ends differently. It ends with a sister, a river, and a truth that refused to stay buried. Danni Hinson wasn't famous. She wasn't rich. She didn't headline national broadcasts or spark documentaries when she vanished. She was, by every definition, ordinary. And that's what makes this story matter even more, because if justice can be denied to someone like Danni for almost 30 years, what does that say about the rest of us? This case isn't about one killer, it's about a culture that finds it easier to move on than to investigate. A system where silence is policy, where young girls are written off as just another accident, where families are expected to grieve quietly, and not ask too many questions. Stephanie Mollett broke that mold. She wasn't a detective, she wasn't a lawyer, she was a heartbroken little sister who turned her pain into purpose, who called, who emailed, who demanded to be heard long after most would have given up, and because of her. A killer was unmasked, not by force, but by truth. The truth didn't knock down the front door, it didn't wear a badge, it arrived quietly, through DNA, through a marriage tree, through a whisper in the genetics of strangers, and then, when it had enough strength, it roared. It's easy to villainize Paul Hutchinson, he deserves it, but the deeper question, the more haunting one, is how many more Paul Hutchinsons are out there, men who know the woods too well, who blend in, who never confess. Men who smile at your family barbecue, then vanish into the background. How many cold cases are one phone call, one test, one brave sister away from being solved, and how many have already faded, lost beneath the weight of bureaucracy and apathy? Danni's case shows us something terrifying, and something hopeful. It shows us how easily the truth can be silenced, but it also shows us that truth never dies. It waits, sometimes for years. Sometimes for decades, but it waits, and when the right people come along, the ones who won't let go, it rises. Today, Danni's story is more than a case file, it's a warning, a memorial, and a call to action, for families still searching. For sisters still fighting, for communities still pretending everything is fine, because it's not fine, not when it takes 28 years to admit a girl was murdered, not when the people paid to protect her choose to protect their reputations instead, not when silence is treated as closure. We owe Danni more, we owe her honesty, we owe her remembrance, we owe her a world where no other girl's name becomes a cold case headline. And to those watching this, maybe you're a parent. Maybe a sibling, maybe just someone who wonders if we ever really get justice. The truth is, sometimes we don't. Sometimes justice looks like a courtroom, sometimes it looks like a closed file. And sometimes it looks like a sister standing at a riverbank, whispering I never gave up. Stephanie didn't solve the case alone, but make no mistake, without her, it would still be buried. So to every sister, every brother, every mother or friend watching this, remember this, you may not have a badge, you may not have training, but you do have a voice, and sometimes that's all it takes. Danni Hinson was smart, funny, fearless, she deserved to grow up. To graduate. To build a life. Instead, she became a statistic, a story whispered in locker rooms and dismissed in press briefings. But no longer. Now, she's a symbol of what happens when truth is buried. And what's possible when someone refuses to let it stay there. Her story may have ended in a river, but her legacy, it's just beginning, and maybe someone out there, watching this, will feel a flicker of fire in their chest, a refusal to stay quiet, a promise whispered into the dark, I got you. Just like Stephanie did, for Danni.
So, that's how crimes end, and if you like this episode, don't forget to like and subscribe and turn on the notifications. If you want me to do some special crimes in all over the world, comment down below, or you can send us direct through email, and I will see you in all my videos. See ya!